Hello and welcome to the Theotivity Podcast. My name is Thaddeus and I'm looking forward to today's episode. We're going to be interviewing Jonathan Wellum. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He is from Rocklinc Investment Partners Inc. It's an independent investment management firm focused solely on creating portfolios of high quality assets customized to their clients' needs of protecting and growing their wealth tax efficiently over time. Now, prior to founding Rocklinc in 2009, Jonathan began his investment career with Portland Investment Counsel, formerly AIC, in 1990 and served as a member of the firm's senior management team. In September of 2009, AIC's retail mutual fund-based business was sold to Manulife Financial. In 1995, Jonathan was named Fund Manager of the Year by the Investment Executive magazine and in 1997 awarded the Fund Manager of the Year at the Canadian Mutual Fund Award Gala. In addition, Jonathan was a recipient of Canada's Top 40 Under 40. Jonathan is one of the advisory board of the Oak Centre, a board member of the Canadian National Christian Foundation based in Ottawa, Ontario, and serves as an elder at Trinity Baptist Church in Burlington, Ontario. Jonathan has been married to his wife Heidi for 30 years, and they have 4 children, Johanna, Jonathan Jr., David, and Christina. Jonathan holds a Bachelor of Commerce and a Master of Business Administration degree from McMaster University, and a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Waterloo. He completed his formal education with a Master of Arts degree in Theology and Philosophy from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Chicago, and he also holds the designation of Chartered Financial Analysis, CFA. So, a very well-credentialed individual, an accomplished man, and a wise man, a godly man. I'm looking forward to today's episode as we talk and discuss a little bit with Jonathan. The Theotivity Podcast. Theotivity is the place where theology and creativity come together. Here you'll find audio narration of articles, episodes exploring the faith, culture, the arts and media, systematic theology, apologetics, guest interviews with Christian thinkers, creatives, pastors, theologians, and much more. At theotivity.com, you'll find articles and resources to help you grow in your faith, as well as a portfolio of creative works. Like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on the latest content. All right, so thank you, Jonathan, for being here. I'm so excited for today's episode and what you've got to share with us. I know you're a very accomplished man, very wise man. I've listened to several of your talks online on YouTube and really benefited a lot. So I'm excited for our listeners to hear what you have to say today. So how about we just jump straight in? And I always like to open off episodes with just kind of a fun question. So Jonathan, tell me, what is the economic reason, the most blessed reason why all pizzerias should have pineapple on every single pizza?
I think it adds a lot of flavor. I'm a fan of
Yeah.
having some pineapple with some ham, so I'm with you there.
All right, good man. Okay, so first question I had for you was, from a Christian worldview, what are some of the problems with how people and even politicians today think about the national economy? We're living in a time, both in Canada and the US and throughout the world, where economies aren't doing that great. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of an analysis from a Christian point of view. What are some of the errors or the problems in people's thinking about the national economy?
Yes, I think it if you step back a moment, it's important to, especially from a Christian perspective and from a biblical worldview, consistent with creation, that God has made various spheres and spheres of sovereignty. And so you have the state, and you have the family, and you have the church, and you have corporations and business, and so on. And I think the biggest challenge and problem we have now is that we have too much government, and government has become much too large. It's more extensive in terms of its tentacles into the economy. And so increasingly, it wants to control the church, it wants to control the family, it wants to control economics, business. And so you have an all-pervasive state increasingly. We've fed this beast to the point that it's become over half of our GDP, in terms of spending of our GDP, it's over half the economy. And I think that that is really a major challenge from an economics perspective, that the most inefficient and potentially corrupt sector, the government, when you give them power, now controls more and more of our economic resources and spiritual resources, social resources, and so on. And people
Mm.
just don't seem to realize the threat that that has in terms of overall economic growth and so on. So I think that
Right.
that's a big issue. Too much top-down control. The next issue
Mm.
would be that, I'm sure we'll talk about these points in more detail. A very small view of our Earth,
Mm.
a very small view of the resourcefulness of the world that God has created for us, and so we have this very small-minded attitude towards our resources. Yeah, we don't have
Mm.
enough to feed people. We don't have enough energy. We don't have enough this. We're going to have this crisis,
Right.
one crisis from one crisis to another. And I think
So it's like a mindset of scarcity as opposed to that God has created abundant creation.
exactly, because when you get
Mm.
back to the Christian worldview, it's production oriented. It's production
Mm.
oriented, not distribution
Mm.
oriented. And so, if you have a
Mm.
worldview that focuses just on distribution, then you're not going to make anything, and there
Mm.
won't be much to
Right.
distribute, and you end up with a tremendous amount
Yeah.
of poverty. Um,
That's a good distinction. I love how you categorize that production versus distribution. Because distribution implies that there's this like limited pie basically that you have to distribute and cut up for everybody to get a piece of the pie. Whereas production is saying that no, actually we've got the raw resources that we can make more pie.
Absolutely. It's not a
Mm.
zero-sum game. That God has
Mm.
given us tremendous resourcefulness and resources in the earth, and we are to develop those resources and to take
Mm.
out poverty. I mean, after the fall, before the fall, work was something that we were created to do because it's a reflection of God, who is a worker. And
Mm.
we are to,
Mm.
made in his image, we're to be workers also. But after the
Mm.
fall, there's the frustration. And so part of work then becomes overcoming the implications of the fall in terms of
Mm.
producing things. And it's going to be by the sweat of our brow, and it's going to take work, and it's going to take effort, it's going to take personal contribution. And you have to
Mm.
then get out and work. And so we've got this issue of poverty. We've got this issue of problems that exist because of the fall, and we're going to overcome those. How are we going to overcome those? Through work and through production and
Mm.
overcoming
Mm.
scarcity by utilizing the resources in the earth. And of course, I'm speaking
Mm.
here just on the economic side. I mean, there's the spiritual side, which is critical, and I'm sure we'll
Mm.
get into that also. But just from an economics perspective, we've really
Yeah.
shifted in the last, I say, couple of decades to just
Mm.
distribution, and that leads to
Mm.
socialism, and it leads to less
Yeah.
production, less wealth creation, more
Mm.
government, more inefficiency, more
Yeah.
ineffectiveness, higher prices, less goods,
Mm.
inflation, lower standards of living.
Mm.
And that's what
Yeah.
we're really seeing in North America, in our whole Western world. We're seeing a tremendous
Mm.
collapse in the standards of living because of
Mm.
our views now have become much more socialistic, and the government controls too many of the resources, and people aren't prepared to work. And in some cases, the
Mm.
government doesn't even give us access to the resources, which is
Yeah.
also an overstepping of their bounds when they restrict the resources that God has given us to utilize
Mm.
for His honor, His glory, and for our good.
Yeah. So you would say then that from a Christian worldview and a Christian way of thinking about economics, that a more free market model is in line with what the Bible prescribes in terms of how economies should run, as opposed to a more socialist or communistic, top-down governance sort of way. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The Bible
Yeah.
has no
Mm.
support for socialism whatsoever. This is
Mm.
something that I think is really horrifying to see Christians
Mm.
fall into this temptation that the state should be involved in education, the
Mm.
state should be involved in healthcare, it should be involved in all these different areas. No, it shouldn't.
Mm.
We need
Mm.
to have a free competitive market, and that will produce the products and services at a much lower cost, and
Mm.
also in a much more fair way. We're seeing the partiality of the state now, and
Mm.
then it's very hard to stop them when they get into a sector and they control it. Then it becomes driven by their own ideology, and it's not a free market anymore. A free
Mm.
market unleashes the talents and the gifts and abilities that God has placed in each of us. And to limit
Mm.
that is to limit the production of wealth for everybody. and it becomes, everybody will become poor, other than the very few people who control the whole mechanism. And so the free market is definitely consistent with a Christian worldview of human freedom, of human responsibility, and that wealth is not created by the state, it's created by individuals through personal effort, merit, and sweat. And that's the only way that wealth is created. And so,
Yeah, yeah.
the Bible.
I always like to tell people, when the government's giving away money and so on, that the government doesn't actually have money; it has your money,
We
because
should be,
it gets all of
yeah.
its resources through force of coercion through taxation.
Yeah,
Right?
we should be
Yeah.
offended when the government
Mm.
sends us a check and it says, you should thank us. No, no, no. We should be very
Yeah.
angry because they've actually
Yeah.
taken our money, as you say, through a rapacious tax system, repressive tax system, and then they put it through an inefficient bureaucracy, which is unnecessary, and then send a check back to us, a portion of it, which is our money in the first place. And then they tell us we should be thankful, and we should be outraged that that is an abuse of power and something that is wasting our money and actually wasting our resources. It's not being a good steward, and it's really immoral, and it's an offense against God.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So maybe tease this out a bit, because I like to make sure that, in these episodes, we're not just preaching to the choir, because often you can just talk and the people who agree with you are going to be nodding along, but then somebody who's maybe on the other side of the aisle might not be tracking a little bit. So can you maybe tease that out a bit more and make a compelling case, biblically and practically speaking, as to why is it that, government systems and economies that are run in a more socialistic, top-down sort of fashion tend to be less prosperous, less efficient than a free market economy? What are some of those reasons?
Well, because of sin. I mean, I think if you really get back to it, you really get to sin. And sin is something that needs to be kept in check. And the best way to keep that in check is through competition. And competition is what's going to ultimately keep a lot of that sin in check. So if you concentrate power, which is what the problem is when you have government, so you concentrate power in the hands of a few, there is no way that you're going to get the kind of innovation and technology development and creativity released that you're going to get in a system that allows private property and allows you to keep and benefit from your work. And so it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And there's no time in history, and every single example that we've seen now for the last 6,000 years will point to exactly the same thing. Statism leads to poverty. Statism leads to very lack of innovation, creativity. Statism leads to abuse. And so you stifle individual creativity, individual gifts and abilities. You start to focus on equality of outcome. And when you focus on equality of outcome, that sounds okay. We're using the word equity, which is thrown around a lot in our day, equity. But what we really want to do is have as much as possible equality of opportunity. We want to give everybody opportunity, and then we need to celebrate differences in outcome, because everybody is created differently. God orders his universe providentially and sovereignly. He hasn't ordered it for everybody to turn out the same way. That's just not the biblical model at all. God is going to give some gifts to some people, other gifts to others, and he holds us accountable for the gifts that he's given us. And so in a system that does its best to provide equality of opportunity, but then lets people go, there's no way a socialist system could even begin to compete with that. And so,
and in that way too, the socialist system is trying to act like God. It's trying to predefine basically like what people will do and how production will go and so on. But they don't have the omniscience to do that wisely.
Oh yeah, and I think that whenever you have a group of old men that sit around a table and make decisions for the whole economy, which is what you saw in the Soviet Union, and to a certain degree, I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see that in China also. China over the last 30, 40 years has done an amazing job building in terms of their economic strength. They stole literally almost everything from the West. They also used our capital through unfair trading and so on. But I think the story is far from over, because they built buildings that had no return on investments whatsoever. They invested in a lot of infrastructure that is absolutely useless. Yeah, you can build a big fancy building, but if it doesn't have any kind of economic return, should you actually build it? That's a whole
Mm,
different question. And so, in a system where you have to be accountable to every dollar for an economic return, or you lose that money and that money goes into the hands of someone else who is uh, more adept and more skilled at generating return, then you're going to have a compounding growth in the economy. But you wait and watch
mm,
China. They have just wasted money. They've wasted billions and billions of dollars. They now have a
mm,
population that's in decline, and they have all these
mm,
stranded assets that have no economic return. So they've got a lot of debts on assets that don't have a return. If you're going to if you're going to build assets and then you're going to put debt against it that doesn't have an economic return, that's going to lead to a collapse. And so I'd suggest that any economy that's driven by the decisions of a limited number of people will eventually
mm,
collapse. It has to, because those
mm,
individuals do not have the power of a market where you have
mm.
millions of people contributing through the price mechanism to make
Yeah.
decisions on how capital is allocated. There's nothing like it. It works
Mm,
like no other system. And the proof of that
yeah.
is the Anglosphere, Northern Europe, the United States, Australia, Canada. These are by far the most productive, wealthiest countries in the history of the world in terms of middle class
Mm,
uh, people. And those are all countries that were heavily influenced by the Reformation and by Protestant
mm.
Christianity.
Hmm. Very interesting. Yeah, because China is often the objection that's brought up in terms of trying to argue the benefits of capitalism and free market over a more top-down system. And a lot of people look to China and say, "Well, look, China did it. They're prosperous. They're doing well." And it's an interesting analysis that you're given, and even predictions there, which I'd agree with. I mean, you're starting to see that
Yeah.
China's starting to grasp at straws, basically trying to hold on to this economy that they've manufactured falsely, basically. And this is why you're seeing them, starting to bring infrastructure into places like Africa and starting to try to mine resources from other countries in order to bolster, I think, what they've done poorly in their own.
Yeah, because of man's fallenness, you never
Mm,
want to concentrate power and decision
mm,
making in a few people. You want to
mhm.
decentralize that. And
Yeah.
again, as you decentralize it, it should all be based upon biblical truth, of course, the scriptures. The
Hmm.
only person that you want to have dictatorial powers is God. And that's it. And
Yeah.
that's because
Yeah.
he is a God who is perfect, he's holy, he's
Mm,
just. And in
mm,
his character and nature, we want him to rule over us because of who he is
mm,
as our creator and our God. But when it comes
mm,
to man, absolutely not. We need to break up
mm,
power. We need to have decision
mm,
making broken into as many people as possible. And that's the beauty of the market. You'll
mm,
always have supply of goods and services if you let the market just operate effectively and let
mhm.
the price go where it goes. If prices
Yeah.
go up and people can make a lot of profits, more supply will come in, prices will come
Mhm.
down. If prices are too low and you can't make money, people will leave that will leave that area. That industry won't produce as much. Prices will come up and normalize, and
Mm,
that mechanism needs to be left alone. And but
mm,
it's very tempting. We all want to fool around with it. We get the government involved. It
mm.
promises things that we can get something for nothing. And we've
Yeah.
seen what that means here in Ontario and in Canada in general. We were
Mhm.
promised 60 years ago that healthcare could be free. I mean, the government would take care of it. But
Yeah.
you give 6 decades of government running our medical system, and it is a disaster. And we have a lot
Mhm.
of debt to show for it, and a very
Yep.
inefficient, ineffective system that's only going to get worse. And
Mm,
so we're living out, some of the problems that we
mm,
thought we could somehow avoid uh,
mm.
50, 60 years ago, but you can't. Our education system is another prime example of a
Yep.
disastrous system on every level
Mm,
now. What they
mm.
teach, what they don't teach,
Yeah.
the perversity of what they're teaching, and so forth,
Yeah.
and trying to take parents right out of the equation. And
Yeah.
that's government control. That's a dictatorial system, and it's
And both of those spheres are, spheres that weren't given to the government by scripture in terms of the delegated authority. So they don't have neither the divine approval to act in those spheres, but also they don't even have the tools. That God gives tools to each leader within its specific sphere. Parents have the rod of discipline. The state has the sword, which is a very specific thing for justice. But if you start using the sword power, like this coercive force in other spheres, it becomes a mess, And I think that's exactly what's been happening.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and again, as I started off with the spheres too, parents, children are the responsibility of the parents first and foremost, not the state. And
Yeah.
and so we've just seen recently in Canada where the state wants to dictate to the parents and completely. And if there's any disagreement, they're not going to allow any of that. And so we're going to reach some points where there has to be some pushback, and we're going to have some major points of friction going forward.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to read you something here from Christian economist Graham Leach. He's noted that there's this trinity of factors that build a successful economy according to God's laws. He says that there are these three: true private property ownership, right? So actually owning property, the proportional minimal taxation as opposed to maximal progressive taxation that we have now, and then privately run individual welfare as opposed to state-run welfare, which is also something that we're struggling with here in the West. So what are your thoughts on this? He says that these three sort of factors, if they're present in any economy, will lead to prosperity, will lead to God's blessing on that economy. So again, it's private property ownership, like so true property ownership, minimal proportional taxation, and then privately run individual welfare as opposed to state-run welfare. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree 100%. No, I think Graham is exactly right. Let's work through each of those. I mean, private property is
Sure.
the foundation, the base, so that you have control over your own resources. You can own your own land, even the rights to yourself and your own labor is part of private property. But also, you can have access to ownership of land and businesses and corporations and so on. That gives you concern and focus on those assets. No one's going to be concerned about your home or land or business or yourself as much as you are. And you're the one that's going to make the best decisions for all of that, all of those areas of private property that fall under your domain. If you centralize that, the decisions will be suboptimal all the way through. And so this becomes a foundation point. And also, if you're building a free market economy, the fact that you can own property, own land, and care for it, it also provides you with collateral. And that's also very important too. So you can borrow against your house or an asset or a business that helps you grow a business. And so you can start with a little bit of money. You've got some collateral and capital. What you'll find in economies where people have nothing to offer as collateral is they really have no access to capital. And so that can starve them. And even if they have good ideas, they really can't make them work. And so private property is essential. It limits the government, and it also stops people from stealing because that's yours and they can't take it away from you. So a whole system of title and making sure there's proper ownership laws and so forth. So there's predictability in the future too. You're not going to make long-term economic decisions if you think your assets are just going to be taken away from you. And you see,
There's a basis for security and taking risk even, right? If like you can own your house, for example, actually own it and not have to, let's say continuously pay taxation to keep your property, then you can take risks because you're like, okay, well, at least I own my land, my property, my house, and I can risk starting a new business that may fail, but I own my house, so I'm not going to lose that unless, of course, you take it as collateral against a loan or something.
Exactly. Yeah, but then you're trying to make a good decision, hopefully. I mean, if you don't, then the money's going to go to the hands of people who hopefully will make better decisions. But there's risk, and you want to have venture capital. You want people taking risk. You want people to try something, and it's not failure if you legitimately go into something, you put your heart into it, and it doesn't work out, then you start over and you do something else. That's the way it works in the world that God has given us. So I think that if you go to any place where property is held in common, you'll see it's not very well developed and not looked after. I mean, it's just great. I mean, I could give you all sorts of examples. I don't want to pick on certain.
Graham gives the example actually like of bathrooms, right? People clean their own bathroom. They take care of their own bathroom. But public bathroom, who goes into a public bathroom and starts cleaning it? Right?
And if you look at the way, unfortunately, the way they've given land to the indigenous people of Canada, First Nations, and so forth, same thing in the United States, the land never gets developed properly and people live in just total poverty. The second item you mentioned would be proportionate tax and minimal taxation. And the reason that's important is because you must starve the beast. You have to
Mm.
keep government at a certain size. And so,
Mm-hmm.
when you're taking money from people from their private property, it should be very transparent. It should be laid out so people know what the rules are. It's not arbitrary, and it should be minimal. And it should be proportionate in the sense that people should pay a similar proportionate amount so that there's fairness within the population. Even the way we have it now, people keep saying, go tax the rich. The wealthy people
Mm.
pay the vast majority of the taxes now anyway. It's already skewed to very few. Part of the problem we have is
Yeah.
that too many people pay no tax, and so they don't
Mm.
feel it. And they'd be better if they felt the oppression of government and pushed back more than
Yeah.
getting a free ride. But having said that, the
Mm.
biggest issue there is keeping government in its lane and making sure that when
Mm.
money is taken from us through taxation, it's fair, it's not
Mm.
overly large, and it's very transparent, so we know exactly what the rules of the game are. And so the government just
Right.
can't come along and say, "Hey, you owe us money," and that happens
Mm-hmm.
in some economies. They just expropriate your
Mm.
assets. And of course,
Mm.
again, no one's going to be investing, thinking long term, building capital for everybody if that's the case. And then the last one would be in terms of charities. This is again something where the church has really, really fallen down. I mean, Christians should be ashamed of themselves in terms of what they've given up in our economy, handing over
Mm.
our hospitals, our healthcare system to the government. It is far, far better for Christian organizations, charitable organizations, to do charitable work. The government does not
Mm.
have the heart of individuals and people. It becomes usually bureaucratic, becomes institutionalized,
Mm-hmm.
non-caring, non-loving. Nothing can compete with individuals and charities who are passionate about caring for each other. And this is
Mm.
this is a big problem. We saw this through COVID also. We saw how the state does not care anything about us. It doesn't care
Mm.
about long-term care facilities. It doesn't care about the pain and suffering when people have funerals and can't attend them. They were,
Mm.
restrict attendance at funerals. Same thing with other celebrations or go after the church. The state
Mm.
has no heart. The state is
Mm.
not going to be representing God the way individuals or churches are going to be. The heart of God, the care, the compassion, the love, the grace. And so I think these
Mm.
three items, which Graham touches on, are very, very important. And then they springboard
Mm.
out into other areas. They have
Mm.
broad implications in terms of our economics and our view of society.
Yeah, awesome. We could definitely continue to talk a lot more on that, but I got some other stuff that I want us to cover. Let me shift gears a little bit. So I want us to talk a little bit about currency because that's a vital part of economies is the currency that we use, right? And I want you to speak specifically to how does God's law relate to money as in currency, and what's your thoughts on the problems with inflationary fiat currency, which we currently have? From a biblical worldview? And is there any alternative realistically?
Yeah, this is a big area. It's a very important area. I mean,
Hmm.
currency, when you think of an effective currency, currency should have a couple of attributes or characteristics. It should be a store of value, which means it
Hmm.
should be stable. If someone gives you money for working, you should be able to hold that in your hand for, a couple days, a couple months without it falling in value and
Right.
being depreciated. That's not really good currency. So stable store of value. It should be a good medium of exchange so that it's accepted amongst people. So it's easy to use it in commerce. It's divisible and acceptable, fungible. And it should also, ideally be portable, so you can, use it very easily. So I
Mm.
think the biggest issue we have with our currency is the currency we have. Yeah, it's divisible, it's portable, and so on. But is it stable in value, and what backs it
Mm.
up? And so for years in the Western world, we had typically a gold standard or some type of collateral standard that behind the money, there was
Mhm.
actually a hard asset that had value so that your currency wasn't just dependent upon the promises of the state, which is what fiat currency means. It means the reason our dollar has any value is because the government tells you it has value. And then everybody just
Mm.
assumes it has value, and therefore, we can all use it. And I think that's very unbiblical. The Bible talks about
Mm.
gold and silver as money. and collateral, and
Mm.
the biggest issue that comes up, and you can use almost anything for money provided it has collateral and some purchasing power behind it. But the biggest problem that we have, that's emerged more recently, is that with our fiat currency, and then pulling the collateral backing out of it, which
Mm.
that's occurred over a number of decades. But the big change was in the Western world was back in 1971 when Richard Nixon took the gold standard, took the U.S. completely off the gold standard, although it was only partially off the
Right.
gold standard anyway. After Bretton Woods back in 1940, in the 1940s after World War II. But the biggest issue now is that there's really no collateral backing to any of our currencies, just a promise. And what's
Mm.
happened is corrupt governments, dishonest governments, desperate governments who want to spend more money than they have and spend more money than they're willing to tax their population with, have started to print the money. And so they start to
Mm.
increase the circulation of money. And that is just downright immoral. I mean, the Bible
Mm.
criticizes and condemns for no uncertain terms, the watering down of currency and
Mhm.
the watering down of your money. We see this in a number of biblical passages. It gets into proper weights and measures. And so I think the biggest
Mhm.
issue now with currency is it doesn't have a collateral backing, so we don't know what's behind it other than government promises. And the government,
Mm.
through their central banks, which they say are independent, which is a complete farce and joke,
Mm.
really. The Bank of Canada does the bidding of the federal government. It certainly has the last 3-4 years.
Mhm.
Will when pushed, just print money, which means it's
Mm.
stealing from everybody else because it's giving people purchasing power without earning it. And it's that
Mm.
purchasing power they have is increased, but the production in the economy has not gone up. And
Right.
therefore, if you keep doing that and you have a certain amount of velocity, there's going to be upward pressure on prices. So all of a sudden you create inflation. If you create
Mm.
inflation, you're also stealing from people. So this is the
Yeah.
challenge we have now. And I think that a Christian view of currency would be much more controlled level of
Mm.
expansion, and you would try to back it with a hard asset, and so it would be forced discipline on the state and on the bank, any central banks you'd have. Although
Mm.
I'd be more inclined to get rid of the central banks, but basically collateralizing it and keeping under wraps the expansion of the currency. Because
Mm.
ideally, you don't need to expand the currency at all. And what would happen if you had a productive economy? Prices would go down.
Mm.
But the
Yeah.
reason why they don't want prices to go down is because we're in a debt-based economy. And so if
Mm.
prices go down, your home prices go down and it's easier to buy them, but people have all this debt against it, then you're going
Mm.
to run into financial problems because there's way too much debt in the system. And so that's why they like to
Mm.
have this inflation going on underneath the surface, because it helps keep the uh, debt-based economy going, if you will.
Right. So it's like masking the problem that's underlying. And it's interesting when you think about it. So we've seen that happen in terms of the prices going down in certain sectors of economy that have been allowed for free market forces to take its route, its natural route. You see that, for example, in tech, right? Look at the cost of computers and personal computers over the past, let's say 2 to 3 decades. We've seen, computers go from something that only the very wealthy can afford, and through innovation and companies providing a lot of competition with one another and pushing one another, the consumer has actually benefited as the prices of computers have gone down in technology as a whole. And I mean, that's not even in a true free market in its truest sense, but we saw some of that play out. And how much more could that play out if that was allowed to happen economy wide, basically?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you go
Hmm.
back to the 50s or the 60s, 1950s, 1960s, people generally, even a working class person, blue collar person with a reasonably good blue collar job, worked in a factory or something like that, their salary, their annual salary might be 50% of the price of buying a home, and on one income. And so the productivity and the wealth levels were much, much higher. Even when I graduated, I started buying a home in early 1990s. I mean, the first home I purchased was well less than Um, well, my income at that point would have been probably 70-80% of the value of the house.
Mm,
What's happened is by expanding the size of government and socializing everything and just increasing debt and spending beyond our means and printing money and so forth, is that incomes have not gone up. Incomes since, I think, since the early 90s maybe have doubled, and home prices have gone up by 4 or 5 times. So,
mm,
and then taxation's gone up and so forth. And so, what we've seen
yeah,
here is the government size and bureaucracy have just crippled our economic prosperity and productivity.
mm,
And so, the only way
yeah,
to reverse that is not more government. I mean, you listen to people and they say, well, we need the government to help us more. It's like, no, get the
no,
government out of our lives, get them
yeah,
out of the
yeah,
economy, people. You don't seem to
yeah,
realize that they're already over
mm,
50%. And if you
yeah,
if you give an inefficient, unaccountable, and now increasingly unjust and
mm,
corrupt system over half of
mm,
the assets in the economy to run, then it's game over. You're not going to have a
yeah,
product. You're not going to grow. And so
mm,
this is, people just don't understand basic economics. It's far better to have the
mm,
private sector in
mm.
competition, working night and day, figuring out how they're going to do it better than handing stuff over to the government to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that tied even to just the overall secularization of our societies. We saw if you just track with the history of the West, that when Christendom was in its prime and was the prevailing worldview of a society, even though, yeah, we can say, yeah, not everybody was regenerate, etc., and there was a lot of cultural Christianity. That's true. But the gospel is powerful. It's a powerful seed, and it created the economies that we're still actually reaping some of the benefits from, which is interesting. Even as secularism has come to replace a lot of the Christian thought that once captured the Western mind, we're still reaping some of the past fruit from that seed that was planted so long ago.
Yeah.
And I think like the economy isn't going to turn around until we have also a shift in the public cultural worldview as well.
Yeah, Dr. Schaefer used to, Francis Schaeffer,
Mm.
who I was raised on in the 70s, 80s,
Yeah.
before he passed away. He used to say that we're living off of borrowed capital, and he
Mm,
was exactly right. And what's happened,
mm,
really the last, say, 4, 5, 6 years, is that all
mm,
that borrowed capital really has been exhausted, if you will. And so now we're
mm,
wondering. I mean, more and more people are wondering, why did the West exist? Where did all this freedom
mm,
come from? Where does this wealth come
mm,
from? I mean, with the COVID lockdowns and the massive government intrusion into our lives, a lot of people are saying, where do these freedoms come from in the first place? And with freedom of speech under attack, like, why did we have freedom of speech? Where did that come from? And they're going back,
mm,
well, that's actually a Christian concept. That actually comes from
mhm,
biblical worldview. And a lot of them are, for the first time, are starting to go back to understanding what is Christianity, what is Christian worldview, and we don't
mm,
appreciate what we have been given in our history in the West. And yeah,
mm,
it's all going to disappear if we don't have a spiritual awakening, revival. We don't
yeah.
repent and turn from our wicked ways and go back
Mm,
to God. I mean, that's just absolutely essential. One of the most
yeah.
important elements of an economy will be the family unit itself. I mean, you cannot
Mm,
avoid statism if you have broken families. And so, to the
yep.
extent that we allow families to just be just decimated and annihilated, really,
Mm,
and we don't have proper roles and responsibilities in families and strong families, then the government steps in.
mm,
If you have a
yeah.
strong family, a strong church that you're involved in, and you don't need a government, you don't even look to the government.
Yep.
You don't want the government around, right? But if
Yeah.
you have a broken
Mm,
home and you're needy and you're not able to look after yourself and you're living
mm,
in opposition to God's created order, and you aren't living in community in a church and so forth with families and help, then the
mm,
state becomes a surrogate God, if you will. And that means
mm,
you're quite happy to see the state get larger and larger and larger. And the trade off is you lose your freedoms, prosperity,
mhm.
and it's not a pretty picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting how you relate, the breakdown of the family to the economy. That those two things are related. And like you said, in a broken family, people are looking for now a nanny state because the parental structure is broken down within the home, right? And this is why I think a lot of people today look to the state as if it's their mother, father, right? That was the language of communism, right? Like Mother Russia, right? Like it was the state becoming that parental figure. And that's very much tied to the breakdown of the family. Let's shift gears a little bit though, because I know I've got a bunch of listeners, and I myself am a Christian creative. I just started a business, Curious Creative Media, that provides a whole bunch of different creative services. And I'm looking at the time that we live in, and I'm getting concerned. And I know I have some friends who are also entrepreneurs on their own and concerned in the times that we're living. Economy is not looking great. Is it actually a good time for us to be starting businesses and doing startups and so on? So I want to get your opinion on this. In the current economy, when things seem to be so hard already as it is, right? With the dominance of like big business in certain sectors and so on, and that there's so much against us, even ideologically, from the state and from culture and so on. Why should we even try, right? Why should, especially since it's so hard to do that, why not just work for someone else? Why should Christians be starting businesses and starting startups and trying to do these things, even when it's hard right now?
Yeah, I think it's a great time to be a business person and be entrepreneurial, and definitely to try your best to avoid working for some big, large organization, which is probably woke and doesn't like you, and
Facts.
and will
Yeah.
will leave you at any time, has no loyalty to you
Yeah.
whatsoever. I mean, large companies
Yeah.
do not care about you. You're a number.
Mm.
So why do I say it's a great time? Well, I think from a Christian perspective, again, we look to the Lord. We realize that He is sovereign. This is His world. He is in control, and we need to look to Him prayerfully and carefully, and say, Lord, where have you gifted me, and where are some areas that I could find in the market where there's some shortcomings, there's some opportunities, and so on, and then jump in there and get going. I think that as we've seen recently with Anheuser-Busch, with Disney, with Target, that these big companies are just falling in on themselves. They're collapsing in on themselves. Their ideology is sinking them. And so I don't think they're as necessarily as hard to compete with as you think. They've got some rules and regulations, and they'll maybe throw a sledgehammer at you or something like that. But the reality is so many of them are driven by false ideologies. These are ideologies that do not fit with the real world, God's world. And so I think there's avenues of competing against some of these large organizations and coming up with products and services that are of redeeming value and based upon Christian principles. So I think the going public of Public Square in the United States just this week, where you can now go on a central database and you can make all sorts of gifts or products, I should say, products and services you can offer that aren't going to be based in some ESG woke world environment. And there'll be more and more of a market where people will want to buy those goods and services. So I see that businesses, some of these large companies, are becoming more inefficient, more ineffective. I look at our Canadian banks. I don't know about you, but you go into the bank branch, it is a very inefficient place now. The technology has not helped it at all. It's impersonal. They don't care about you largely, and I'm not speaking here about all the different employees. I'm speaking about the system itself. And we're in the financial service businesses. A lot of the people coming to us, they're coming because they don't want the depersonalized approach, the institutional approach that you're just treated as a number. They don't want pictures all over the walls of every kind of sexual deviation known to man, which has nothing to do with banking. They're fed up with it. So I would say for Christians and for entrepreneurs, especially young people setting out, look for an opportunity, take the risk, go into venture capital. And the reality is that most innovation is done in small organizations, even to this day. Apple, for example, buys tens and 20, probably 50 companies a year. And they're buying small companies because they're buying talent, they're buying ideas, they're buying patents from entrepreneurial people. So I think that we have a mandate as Christians to go forward and to take charge, to allocate capital, look to God. He's the one that's sovereign. Look to Him for His blessings. There's that wonderful passage in Ecclesiastes, right near the end, Ecclesiastes 11, I believe, which talks about casting your bread upon the water. And you don't know what's going to come back, but you know something will come back. God will reward that in some way or some fashion. And if it looks like it's going to rain, you still go out and seed. If it looks like it's going to be windy or it's going to be the weather's going to be bad, you still go out and seed. You still go out and reap. We
Mm,
don't stop. We keep pressing
mm,
on. We're optimistic. Our God's in control. We know the end of the
mm,
story, and it's an amazing story, and it's one of complete and utter victory. And so
yeah.
I think that we need to not be dissuaded at all. Don't be scared by large organizations. They can fall
Mm,
very quickly. Who would have thought that
mm,
Disney, in just a matter of a couple of years, would make
yeah.
the kind of mistakes that they've made? Now, this is, Disney's never been an organization that I think Christians should be big supporters of anyway. I mean, it's a very false worldview
Hmm.
from the day they incorporated the organization. But
Yeah.
that they would actually say they're family oriented and then turn on families.
Hmm.
Who would have thought that, again, a beer that's supposed to be for jocks and men would use a transgender person to promote their product? I
Yeah.
mean, this is
Yeah.
insanity. And so I think the
Yeah.
insanity of some of these companies will just provide more opportunities
Mm,
for creative business
absolutely.
people. So go
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely go for it.
Yeah. I think the consumer market's getting fed up as well too.
Yes.
Like even just the average person who never really has thought about worldview issues is looking at those things, and they're so ridiculous now. They're making the ideology just stink, right? And people are looking for valid alternatives to turn to, which
Yeah.
is why like I'm super excited about the public square thing.
Yeah. I mean,
And I
I would.
hope that we see more of that here in Canada, right?
Yeah, and I think Public Square, I've heard
Yeah.
that they're gonna be coming up to Canada too, but in network,
Okay.
I
Good.
don't wanna buy anything
Mm,
from Nike. I mean, I used to
yeah.
think, okay, Adidas might be a little better until they put some person, some man dressed up in a woman's bathing suit, and it's like, enough for
Yeah.
Adidas, I don't wanna buy them either. So will I buy
Yeah.
some sporting, outfits by a company that can build the same quality? I don't care about the
Mm,
brand, but I know it's gonna be coming from a company that, has the same values that I have. Absolutely.
mm-hmm,
Absolutely. I
mm-hmm,
think that's duplicated
mm,
and multiplied throughout the whole system. Look at the latest movie, The
mm,
Sound of Freedom. They laughed at that, and
mm.
The Sound of
Yeah.
Freedom wasn't going to, that's not going to go anywhere. They didn't get any support by the big people. It cost what, $15 million to make, and looked like
Hmm.
they'll be grossing over $100 million. Well, that's a
Yeah.
pretty good return on investment.
Oh yeah.
Meanwhile, you have the other series, the Harrison Ford series, and
Yeah.
they spend over $200 million on the film, and they'll be lucky if they get
Mhm.
half of that back, right? So,
Hmm.
the reality is we can compete against
Mm.
debased stupidity, which is what I'm thinking you're seeing now in more and
Yeah.
more of the economy, and I think that
Mm.
we should not be deterred in the least. In fact, I think we should get
Mm.
excited and we should
Mm.
encourage Christian entrepreneurship. But and I mean true entrepreneurship, not being lazy, but really
Mm.
hardworking, creative people who have been gifted by
Mm.
God, and
Mm.
get behind them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's super encouraging for me. I know, because just getting started off, it can feel like a real hill because as you're launching a business, as you know, it takes time for that
Yes.
to build up, a reputation, a portfolio, and clients, and all these things. And that grind can be really discouraging. But
Yeah.
it's good to hear that, and especially since like I'm trying for myself to build a company that's explicitly Christian and honors the Lord and is, going to not compromise on that. Like I'm making it a point to be like, we're not woke. We're not gonna be, pushing that type of agenda or going along with it.
Wait. Yeah.
And my hopes are is that there's actually a market for that because I'm sensing this that people are fed up that they're looking for these sorts of
Yeah.
alternatives, and I'm hoping that more Christians will be bold to step out like that. And I think it will cost some of us something, but I don't think that it'll, in the long run, eliminate all of these Christian startups and alternatives. I think
Yeah.
eventually the market
Yeah, I
will
mean, you go
favor it.
back to the
Mm,
horrors of Nazi Germany,
mm,
and even in
mm,
the Europe, it was hard sometimes for the Jewish folks to work in other organizations, and so they became very creative as a group and started their own
mm,
businesses and got involved in a number of industries, and
mm,
said and became quite wealthy and created a lot of wealth. So sometimes that adversity
mm,
can lead to
mm,
opportunities, and I think that's what we have
mm.
to focus on. But Christians of
Yeah,
all people should be those who are prepared to take risk because we know the God
mm,
who holds the future, and
yep,
so it's not just some
amen.
arbitrary chance world that we live in.
Yeah,
It's God's world.
amen, amen. It's good. So I got a listener question for you, actually. So let me read it out, and you can respond. So how can someone in ministry build equity and wealth for his children while still being employed full time in a church? And as you know, church ministry doesn't necessarily, pay that well. especially in the current economy where more and more people are finding it hard to make ends meet in the city. So what would be your advice to someone who's in full-time vocational church ministry? How can they build equity and leave an inheritance for their children?
I think you just go back to the very basic principles that the Bible gives, and that means you have to save, you have to be disciplined, you have to set money aside. So I think that a couple of things: try to get a home, try to invest in some real estate that at least you're living in a place and you're building equity in a home. And then I think it's critical that you have a budget and you lay out exactly what you're going to be spending, and you then set aside a small amount of money and what you can save out of that. Even if it's a small amount, it will compound, and then set that aside and invest that money, and just try to find a place where you can invest it in a sane, sensible investment program. And there's really no
I
short.
happen to know a company that does investments.
Yeah, I'm not trying to promote but I think there really is no silver
Yeah.
bullet. There's no shortcut, and we don't know what the future has. It's like I have a number of pastors that are clients, and the vast majority of them, if they're really theologically astute, are just disciplined savers, and I see them putting that into practice. And there's others that are kind of, they inordinately worry about things. These aren't some of the leaders, but there may be smaller, pastors, and they worry about the future, and they worry. And I'm thinking, you're a pastor, you should have more confidence and more faith and stuff. And then they end up saving nothing. And so it's the little by little by little, it's the discipline, it's being creative in the home, working together with your spouse and on ways that you can, save money and get creative and create different revenue streams even. That's what works over time. And as I said, I've seen people that are in the ministry and they make the same amount of money, and one might retire with financial assets, not even a home, in over $1 million, and another might have 50 grand, and not even that. And it was just the discipline over the time. So I think that again, set aside a little bit, have a budget, be very careful, think long term. Don't let the current events cripple you from sticking to the proper principles of saving and being financially frugal and disciplined. And part of that too is, is to give money to church. I mean, the Lord gets it off the top, right? That's part of tithing. I think it's very important to first give back to the Lord, even when it hurts. That's what you're supposed to be doing, and trusting the Lord. I came from a home. My father was a chiropractor, and he used to be very generous to the church. And he always said, "You can never outgive the Lord." And he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and so he was always a good example of that. And so I think, first give to the Lord. Second, take care of your family, and have a disciplined budget. Set money aside, and try to buy assets that are going to hopefully go up in value and protect your purchasing power over time, starting with some real estate and then building out from there.
Yeah. So you would say prioritize in terms of if they're trying to say, what do we save to invest in? What would be some of the asset classes, let's say, that they should be prioritizing investments in, particularly because they don't have a whole lot of cash flow?
Yeah, I think they should find an investment vehicle that's going to be just very disciplined and long term, and investing in really healthy quality businesses or harder assets. Could be property, things like that. So look, I operate in the stock market. The stock market is a wonderful way to participate directly in equities in businesses. And I think that it's a very efficient way of doing it. It's a wonderful opportunity. And so I would say, you're going to have to probably find a fund or someone who's operating something that they feel comfortable in, what's going to be consistent with their principles. I mean, we as a company right now, we look at the market and we say, yeah, it's going to be tricky, it's going to be a challenge, but that doesn't stop us from investing in high quality companies that we think are trading at good prices, and then being patient over the long term. I mean, the alternative is you don't save, or you go and spend money you don't need to spend, And that's not a proper alternative either. We have to trust the Lord. I mean, the
Right.
Bible gives us all of these examples that Christ speaks to these issues in many of his parables and examples. We
Mm,
are to use our resources wisely, and we're to put them to work. We're not to put them underneath our
mm,
pillows. We
mhm.
have the example of the talents, and the one that got
Yeah.
in trouble was the one that just gave back what he got. We
Mhm.
are to put our time, effort, money to work. And if
Mm,
it goes down in value when we can't control it, that's so be it. That's the nature of the beast. That's not what we
mm,
want, but that doesn't justify concerns over the future, does not justify not being obedient to God.
mm, mm. Yeah, that's good. Good word and hopefully encouraging.
Mm.
So let's end it off with a question that's more aimed at for those in ministry and pastors. You yourself are elder in a local church, and I love the perspective that you bring as well. But not every church is gonna be blessed to have an economist as an elder, right? And as a pastor. But in your experience, what's some of the most misunderstood perhaps aspects of the economy and economics that Christians and pastors seem to get wrong, and how can pastors particularly equip their people to think Christianly about economics, and perhaps maybe why should they have some sort of urgency? Obviously, it's maybe not the thing that you preach on every week, but why should there be some concern about equipping your people in this way as well?
Yeah, and I think that let me just read. I have a quote here from Warren
Mhm.
Brooks, and let me just read from that. I think it's a very helpful quote. He says, "A national economy, like an individual business or a specific product, is the sum of the spiritual and mental qualities of its people, and its
Mm,
output value will only be as strong as the values of society." And he says there's many examples of barbaric societies which practiced the free market of the jungle and finally perished in the poverty of hedonism. Without the
mm,
civilizing force of universal moral standards, particularly honesty, trust, self respect, integrity, and loyalty, the marketplace quickly degenerates. A society that has no values will not produce much value. A nation whose
mm,
values are declining should not be surprised at a declining economy. And as one person says, a dollar is not value, but representative of value, and at last of moral values. So what I'd
wow.
say the
Okay, hold up. Can you give me those quotes? Like, send me those quotes because I'm gonna put them up on the
yes, yeah,
screen for this
yeah,
episode.
yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
Everything that happens in the family, in the church,
Mm,
our consistency with God is what gets infused in our economy, in our society.
mm,
The church is not separate from the economy, from business, from the government. It's what sets the whole tone of the ethics, the morality, the standards, the
mm,
law that's going to be in the society and in the businesses and in every area of the economy. And so this
mm,
idea, I think that the concern is that you go to church, we compartmentalize the sacred, we worship
mm,
God and on Monday and so forth. It doesn't have an implication out into the everyday life. That is probably one of the biggest uh, mistakes that we have made over the last number of decades in the West.
mm,
That it is our biblical understanding, our biblical law, our biblical standards, biblical morality that must infuse every single area of life. If our Christian
yeah.
morality and standards don't underpin our biology, our physics, our chemistry, our political science, our sociology, our economics, our finance, we're going to be in trouble. All of these
Mm,
areas are under the lordship of Christ, and they all have to be controlled by governing ethics and morality and integrity, honesty, and so on. And so I think that's the biggest mistake. What happens in a church is
mm,
what ultimately is most important thing that we can do is coming together to worship the Lord, to be trained in His Word, and then go out into the world as ambassadors of Christ, and then live out the Christian life into all
mm,
areas of life. So, me in
mm,
finance, myself in finance, my team here, other people in other areas of commerce, education, we have to take back our world,
mm,
and so if we want a strong, prosperous economy, it'll only be as strong as the values in the economy.
mm,
And so,
mm,
as Warren Brooks points out in this quote, that if you have an economy that has declining values, we see the immorality all around us. Our economy will blow up. It will not be
Mm.
sustained. And so,
Yeah.
Tocqueville, many years ago, when he came to the United States, the French sociologist, and he looked at the states, he goes, "What makes this strong nation?" He says it's because they're good. I mean, it wasn't perfect nation,
Mm.
obviously, but he said, what was the contrast here? He says he went into Middle America, went into the United States back in the 1800s, and he went into the churches and he saw vibrant churches. He saw vibrant
Mm.
court systems that were concerned about justice and standards of justice and so on. And if you have a
Mm.
society like that, then it's going to be dead simple. You're going to produce a lot of wealth, and you're going to be a prosperous, free economy. And
Mm.
but if you don't have those values and they decline, then your economy is going to decline, and your dollar ultimately will decline. And that's what we're seeing in our
Yeah.
own economy. So that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing that our Christian morality and ethics need to infuse every area of life. And so what a pastor is
Mm.
doing on Sunday is just the tip of the iceberg of how that must then work out into
Mm.
all of society through the congregants and through the members and adherents in that church.
Mm. Mm. That's so good. That's so good. And I hope that was helpful and inspiring to Christians and pastors and church leaders, especially. Perhaps, do you have any as we close off? Do you have any resources that you could point people to if they're looking to get a Christian understanding of economics and how the Bible should inform how they think about it? Are there any books or maybe video lectures or whatever type of resources you want to point people to that can help them on that journey?
Sure. I mean, what I could do, Thaddeus, is maybe to send you
Mhm.
something that you could post. I could send a number of books.
Sure.
I think that would be helpful rather than maybe rattling
Yeah.
off some now. But just give a bit of a bibliography of a
Mhm.
handful of books that I think are quite helpful. Dr. Grudem,
Mhm.
Wayne Grudem, has a couple of books
Mm.
also on economics I think that are excellent. I studied under Dr. Grudem at
Mhm.
Trinity Evangelical Divinity School back in the late 80s. And
Mm.
he has a big systematic theology book too, but he's also written on God, government, on wealth
Mhm.
creation, and some very really helpful biblically oriented work, which is I find
Mm.
an easy read too for people. But
Yeah.
I'll send along some books, and then you can just attach them to the
All right.
podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure to put those in the episode description and links to all of the resources. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. Jonathan, can you tell people where they can find you? Where they can find out perhaps a little bit more about Rocklinc as well?
Sure, that probably the best way of tracking us down. You can
Mhm.
go to our website, which is just rocklink.com, and Rocklink is
Mhm.
spelled ROCK, rock, which is easy to spell, but link is
Yeah.
the tricky one. So it's LINC, not K. So we did spell it
Mm.
incorrectly, but it gave us a .com address right away.
Yeah.
So rocklink.com, and then they
Mhm.
can also anyone wants to send me an email, it's easy to get through to me. Just J Wellum. So my last name, you'll see it there, jwellum at rocklink.com. And if you go on our website, also there's phone numbers there too. And we're very accessible. We
Mhm.
love talking to people. We have about 270 families or more now that we look after. And the majority of those are probably Christians, but we look after anybody who wants to have prudent, long-term, disciplined wealth management.
Mm. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. I know I have, and I hope that you took away something that you can then put into practice in your lives. So until next time, solely Theo Glory. Thanks for listening to the Theotivity podcast. If you found this content helpful or edifying, please leave a review on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, follow us on social media and consider sharing this episode to help Theotivity reach others as well. Check out theotivity.com for resources, info on how to support, and subscribe to our monthly newsletter to stay up to date on all the latest content. Until next time, live and create to the glory of God.